Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome you for this interesting talk on how does the human brain work. So, let me share my screen. So, the title of today's talk is How Does Human Brain Work? And this is the seventh talk of the series. In the previous talk, we talked about the neural intelligence mechanism, and today we are talking about how the human brain works. The previous talk was about the electrical modeling of neurons. How does it work? How does it learn? And so on. Just a quick revision before we start today's talk, that a neuron learns by altering its ionic channel parameters of transfer function. And suppose certain input to certain dendrite was able to fire the neuron after five pulses, five consecutive pulses coming after short interval. After learning, after it is repeated several times successfully, it may start firing the neuron with just two pulses. And vice versa is also true. If some input fails to fire for a long time, then its sensitivity and probability of successfully firing the neuron will diminish. Okay, so instead of two pulses, now it may take five pulses, 10 pulses, or some other inputs along with this input. Okay, so that was in nutshell about the neural intelligence. One point which got missed out in the previous talk was mention of the speed of signal propagation in neuron. Actually, currents are supposed to flow at the speed of electricity, but then here we are not talking of flow of electrons per se. Here we are more talking of flow of sodium potassium ions, which are much bigger than electrons physically and which have to flow within some medium. So the fluid viscosity will come into play. So many parameters will come. Consequently, the ionic flow is likely to be much slower than the flow of electrons. Another thing is that if the neuron axon is firing and it has a significant length, okay, it there is a propagation delay which will make a difference of where the signal will reach after what time, and mainly it is on account of at the synopsis you have to make the chemicals available which are used as neurotransmitter. So somewhere those are generated within the neuron in the cell body, and they have to be transported all the way down the axon length. So there is an exoplasmic fluid flow also associated with the neural signal transmission, and that is much slower than electricity, of course. So ultimately, the speed at which neurons will be able to respond will depend on all these factors, and consequently, yes, uh, the propagation delay will assume some significance. Okay, it will not be as if all the signals are almost same, reaching at the same time at the speed of electricity. So that was one point which I thought I should clarify. Uh, Now let's come to the today's talk of how does human brain work. Now we have in the previous videos already talked about the sensors which are there below the skin. That is the somatic sensors, the touch sensors, the pain sensors, the temperature sensors which are there, and of course the taste sensors which are there on tongue, and olfactory sensors which are at the top of the mouth cavity, right? So today we are focusing on the remaining two senses which we have not considered so far. That is the sense of hearing and the sense of vision. Now these are elaborate sensors which have lot of post processing which is also required to be done for the signal. For example, this is from some book. I have taken the diagram of inner ear. So this is the diaphragm, and these are some linkages, and this is some fluid-filled canal, cochlear cochlea, and there are some hair inside. When the fluid moves inside, it is sensed through some nerves, and these are cochlear nerves. Okay, and along with, of course, sensing the amplitude and frequency of the sound that is coming through both the ears. Ear has one more sense which is lesser recognized, that is the sense of acceleration. So you have these three horns which are there, semicircular canals. Okay, now these loops have some fluid filled. So if the body is accelerating in any direction, this is like a transducer which is able to sense in which direction the acceleration is taking place. And the malfunction of this leads to vertigo. leads to giddiness. Okay, so this is again connected to a nerve which is taking it to the brain. So this is the sound signal from the ear, and we have two ears, and the two ears are given by nature not for the show or just symmetry, but of course there is a stereo sense to be associated with the sound, so that we are able to decipher that from which direction the source of sound is located with respect to us, with respect to our head. Yeah. So stereo sense is something which is determined based on post processing of the signal. The signals from both the ears are compared in terms of loudness and propagation delay of sound, and then it is figured out that where is the direction of source with respect to our head. Yeah, so that is the post processing part, but this is the sensing of hearing. And sensing for vision is of course much more elaborate and much more sophisticated to that extent. See, our intelligence is as good as our senses. Senses meaning the number of senses, the variety of senses, the resolution, range, and response time of senses. Yeah. So uh, surely, I mean, we can't compete with microscope and telescope. So it's not that what we have is the best. Of course, science has found out much better resolution, much better range. But then the post processing aspect, we are much superior in the sense that, yes, there are rods and cones inside the retina. So they resolve the color and they resolve the intensity of light, okay, on the retina. So this is the backside of retina, backside of the eye. This is from where the light comes, okay, and it is falling on these. So optically, there are some transducers here which are sensing the color. So there are primary colors here, are red, green, blue, so which are resolving the chromatic composition of the image plus the intensity. So the intensity is transduced and the colors are transduced and they are taken through the optic nerve to the brain. Okay, and just like ears, we have two eyes, and as against the ear, this particular sense is mapped. So when we see something image, we know which is on the left side, what is on the right side, what is in the middle, what is at the upper side, what is the lower side of field of view, and all that. That's called mapping. So we are able to map the field of vision. We are able to map the space around our head, and we are able to place the objects when we see where they are with respect to our body. Okay. So post processing plays a very important role. We are able to do the adjustment of light sensitivity, that is iris, the light intensity, the contrast. We are able to adjust the focusing, okay, the distance of the object which we are trying to focus at. Yeah, and of course the movement of eyelids, eyeballs. So there is a lot of movements involved in this system, and there is a lot of post processing involved. In that sense, it is a very advanced sensor, the very advanced sense that we have in the vision system. So going on further, the brain, human brain, has many association areas where it has been found that which area of the brain is associated with what functionality. For example, this rear side is occipital lobe and it is required for vision. So the visual memory resides somewhere here. Okay, so that's the rear side of the brain, the occipital lobe. Somatosensory area is somewhere here. Somatosensory means skin, touch, feel, skin. Okay, all the motor functions, that is muscle control, is item number 6. Item number 4 are all the sensory areas, that is sensing all the hair roots, sensing all the touch, temperature on the skin and inside the body, on the in the inside organs as well as on the outside. Okay, and then of course we have this is an important organ. This is called a cerebellum, serial number 11. This is responsible for servo control of body movement. In engineering, we have closed loop control, feedback control, and so called PID control that we do. Now, analogous to that, the PID control of the body movements and muscle actuation is controlled through this cerebellum, that is item number 11. Okay. Then there are some areas, specific areas. Let us see. The limbs are mapped with the item number 7. So these are association areas which are connected to the forelimb and hind limb, that is legs and hands and fingers, of course. Okay. Then we have, this is PID or servo loops, as I said. So if this organ is damaged, then if somebody is moving the hand, it moves with a lot of vibrations. It is like hunting. So servo stability is lost. The stability of position control is lost. So that is that. And the capability of forming word is associated with Broca's area, that is serial number 8. So whenever we are thinking of some word, whenever we are forming words to form a sentence, yeah, we are searching for words, that is somewhere here. Okay. And grammars and rules are in Wernicke's area, that is serial number 3. So somewhere here again. Okay. So serial number 8 and serial number 3, they are probably internally connected. They are a similar color. So the grammar rules and the math rules and all the rules are residing somewhere here. All the rules that we try to follow. Okay. So the rules are residing in item number 3. So these are, the picture is thanks to what is available in public domain. So acknowledgements for that and gratitude. So I have just added some things that is I wanted to explain the association areas. Now let us talk of the block diagram of working of human brain. Now this is important. I urge you to pay attention because it's going in a sequence, animated. So intelligence starts with sensory inputs and motor outputs. So basically inputs and outputs. Like we talk, whenever we talk of electronic controller, say a programmable logic controller that we use in machines, we have to start with IOs or inputs and outputs, where each input is coming from and where the output is going. Okay. So also human brain intelligence is ultimately consequent to receiving inputs and through outputs. So inputs and outputs, and we have 5 known senses, that is taste, smell, and these are very simple sensors. They just give you the type resolution, that is whether it is sweet or sour taste. Okay. So what kind of taste, sweet, sour, bitter, etc., and the intensity of bitterness and salinity, etc. So type resolution and intensity, that's all that is there. So also in smell, whether you are smelling a rose or you are smelling an apple, okay, uh, we are able to decipher what is that smell and what is the intensity of that smell. Okay. So taste and smell sensors are very simple sensors. They are just giving you a signal which is resolving the type and the intensity value for that type. But all the human senses have some adjustment. They have a feature which is there in instrumentation, which is called as auto resolution and auto ranging. Suppose you have had too much of sweet, then you will no longer find something sweet. Okay, so the sensitivity will suffer. So also when you are testing perfumes, you can figure out that first time when you are sensing, you have some much higher sensitivity. Subsequently, after trying out 2 3 perfumes, you find it is very difficult to decipher. Okay, because the sensitivity comes down automatically due to auto resolution and auto ranging function. So there is a sensitivity control which is associated with these sensors through post processing. So basically, the what neurons associated with these sensors do is they just pick up the signal and they do some multiplication to adjust the sensitivity, and they present to the brain the intensity and type of the signal received. Very simple. Okay, so very simplest possible thing. So any IOs have to have pre or post processing. Outputs will have pre-processing, post processing will be for inputs, right? So after the input is received on the neuron, there will be some post processing, some multiplication, some scaling, some function, software function, which will take care of the signal, and then it will modify the signal and then present further, right? So, and after that, what happens is that if it is some new taste or new smell, it goes in the archive that yes, this is sweet, this is sour, this is this taste, that taste, and so on. So also for smell and taste are quite similar. Okay. Now, smell is by sensing the molecular structure at the upper part of the mouth. So it senses the aromatic molecules with the glove-like sensors. Wherever the molecules fit very well, it generates a click, and so we are able to identify the type of molecule, right? And taste is generally sensing through ions and salts. So whatever is the composition of salts and ions, whatever we eat, there are taste sensors which resolve it ionically or through small molecules through solution, okay, physically, right? So these are the two senses, but they are sister senses, you can say. They are more or less similar in attributes. So I have combined both of them. The post-processing part is similar for both: type resolution, intensity resolution, sensitivity adjustment, and archiving. So whatever new thing which is heretofore not known will go in archive, and whatever has already been learned, whatever new thing will come will be compared with the archive, and it will be determined that yes, this thing is sweet, this thing is sour, this thing is that, and so on. And thereby you are able to identify what is coming. Okay. So this is what this green box is what I call it as primary sensory image memory. Now this a complete block diagram is my own. This is not borrowed from anywhere. So that's why this is in highlight, this complete sheet. Okay, you will not find it anywhere. So please pay attention. So primary sensory image memory, uh, whatever inputs come, they are memorized and stored here. That's the primary sensory image. I have called it image because I want to take care of all kind of simple and complex sensing mechanisms. So image is covering all the attributes. So even for taste and smell, I have preferred to call it as image memory. So then the more advanced sensors, of course, is auditory sensor, ears. Now here the post processing is intensity resolution, stereo sense incorporation, that you decipher from which direction the sound is coming based on relative intensity in both the ears. You are able to determine the depth of source, that is how far the source is located, the direction, and of course you resolve the frequency of the sound, frequency spectrum of the sound, and amplitude. And again, like here, you are able to adjust the sensitivity of the sense. Okay. And everything here is software controlled. Like figuratively we say sometimes we hear but we don't listen. So something comes here but we don't pay, it is not further processed to any depth. So that's where we say that sensitivity has become crude. So we have learned to ignore whatever is coming. So sensitivity is again a software function which is done in post processing. Yeah. So this is the post processing for the sound signals that we are sensing. And again, just like this, there is a auditory memory archive. That's the primary sensory image memory. Whatever sounds we hear, the cat sound, dog sound, daddy's sound, mummy's sound, all that the child is able to store in the memory. Okay. And so that's the auditory memory, which is storing, and later it is able to identify that who is speaking. Okay. So that is the function. Then of course the most advanced sense, that is the visual sense, which is an array of sensors. Those are not just single transducer, it's an array of transducers in both the eyes. Now here, of course, many functions are there, like mapping is there. We know which part of field of view the signal is coming, where the object is sitting. Okay. In which order the objects are placed. Okay. Which is in which disposition, which is on left, which is on right, which is at the top, which is at the bottom, and what are the intensity values of light or colors those are coming. Then stereo sense is still associated in post processing, so that we are able to gauge the real size of the object, the depth of the object, and how far it is located. So depth, direction. We are able to adjust the contrast. Like if we are in a dark room for a long time, our eye becomes very, very sensitive, and even very dim light we are able to see. Okay. Very faint colors also we are able to decipher. So there is an auto resolution. Okay. There is an auto ranging, auto intensity control, and of course there are default safety for the eye because it is very sensitive. So eyelids are there. If something is coming, the eyelids will, as a reflex, they will close. Very bright light is coming, the eyes will close. Okay, so there is some inbuilt safety features in this one because it is a very delicate transducer. Iris control is there, tracking is there, and focusing is there through the muscles which are there associated with the eye. And in addition to contours and colors, we are able to, sorry, in addition to intensity of colors, we are able to see the outline of objects. Those are the contours. So boundaries we are able to see more clearly than the solid object. Okay, so these are some of the attributes of post processing of visual sensor array that is there in our both eyes. So it's associated with visual memory, which is in the occipital lobe behind the brain, that is on the rear side of the brain. Okay, so occipital lobe is there behind, which is responsible for the visual memory, right? So after we have learned some objects from their taste, from the smell, from their sound, from how they look. See, learning in infant begins at the object level always. Okay. A tiny tot starts learning first what is milk, what is water, what is apple, what is mama, what is papa. Later he learns what are letters and what are alphabets. A for apple comes much later than the apple in learning. So basically, the child will see something red, something like a cricket ball size. Okay. And with the sweet smell that is coming, with the sweet taste that is coming, sweet sour taste, and somebody is saying apple, so the phonetic apple is registered. Okay, so that is learned as an object by first level of correlation between these three memory areas, these three archives. Okay, so there will be an interrelation between the smell, between how you call that object and how the object looks. So that is where we start learning about objects. The learning begins at object level, at word level. Okay. A tiny tot first learns papa, mama, milk, water, later the alphabet, later the sentences, of course, later the rules of grammar, much later. Right. So objects and words, the entire learning in human brain begins at object level. Objects and words are one and the same. And also I can extend the definition to maybe places, people, materials, and food items. Okay, so everything comes under objects, let us say. It's object level memory. This is a hybrid sensory image memory. Why it is hybrid sensory image? Because some memory area from here, some from here, some from here get correlated, and that is what we call as hybrid sensory image memory. So there is some linkage here which is linking some memory areas in these green things. Okay, and that is defined as a word, as an object, understood as an object. So this is the first level of correlation where the child is able to identify objects, people, places, materials, and food items. Okay, so that's the first level of correlation. And I must say, I was writing this article related to this subject in 1988 when my son was to be born. And I must acknowledge that most of these ideas I have learned from him. So thanks to him, how his brain has learned things I have observed, and then that's how this thing has come. I have been able to verify some of what my thoughts of how the learning works. Okay, so that is one. Going further, In the brain, there is a function which is a biological clock and something which is giving some sense of time, which is marking a time stamp on things as they are arriving. So through the senses, whatever will come, okay, some time stamp will be associated with those things, and then they could be arranged in some time sequence. Okay. Now this is an advanced function which comes much later. Okay, where biological clock and sequencing arranges the objects in the order in which they appear, right? So I mean, if somebody is reading a written page and there are word after words, even the sequence of word, because when the eye is reading, which will come first, which will come later, that will determine the order of things in a way. Yeah. So sequencing and clocking function is there in the brain deep somewhere. Okay. And that gets associated, and that is used to analyze and synthesize the objects in this memory area. And when you synthesize several objects together in a sequence, uh, it works in two ways. One is called analysis, other is called synthesis. So one is you break the heard letter into phonetics. So you identify the alphabet, numbers, letters, elements. Okay. So this is the analysis. So after further learning, the child is able to see A for apple. So yes, that is where analysis has started. Okay. So breaking this thing into simpler parts, into elements, and having an element memory which is developed subsequently of analysis. And on the other side, of course, for doing that, you have to track your eyes. You have to move your eyes, move the head, scan, and so eyeball tracking function, etc., have to be exercised. So there is a block which is controlling the muscles, which is directly fed from this sensory area, and it is enabling you to scan the entire field of view, focus on things, able to place them which is where with respect to your body. Okay, so that is further helping you in sequencing the images, the objects that one finds. So this is a function, and of course for exercising muscle one has to use the servo controls and the PIDs that I spoke of, so that the eyes move smoothly and they don't start oscillating. Okay, so servo controls and PIDs are there, which control the various muscles. And by now, the infant must also learn where which muscle is located, how to map the muscle. In order to move a finger, which muscle has to be exercised? In order to focus the eye, which muscle has to be exercised? Okay, to move the eyeball, which muscle has to be exercised? So, all these mapping of outputs is to be learned. Okay, and all these servo controls, the precise control, position controls have to be learned. Okay, now after all this is learned, of course motor outputs enable you to move your eyes, move your head, focus on objects, able to place things. And there are some sensors which are directly connected with the body control muscles, etc. There are some sensors, like there is a chemical level sensor, there is a sensor for physiological parameter for things like pH value, for the heartbeat rate, for the breathing rate, and stuff like that. So there are sensors which are within the body to sense the peristaltic movement of the food, and all those sensors are intimately and directly connected to the muscles, to the motor output. So these are involuntary movements, so they need not come to your sensible brain, or where you are able to have a voluntary control. So they are autonomously directly connected to the muscle control, and that's there. Okay, and the sense that I spoke of some time back related to acceleration in the inner ear is of course Not very significant as far as this aspect is concerned of building sensory image memory, but it goes directly more or less to the muscle control, to keep the stability of the body, to maintain the stability of the body, and in a way tune up these PIDs for related to movement of the body. Okay, so acceleration control works together. Like when somebody is running, this fluid will be vibrating, acceleration is there, stomping is there. So the stability has to be controlled using this sensor through this part, right? So this is the body control mechanism. The voluntary, more than voluntary, it is involuntary, of course, directly here. Okay, and also there is a somatic sensor which is there under the skin. The sensor for pain, for touch, for smoothness, roughness, for pressure, all those are also mapped, because certainly we know whether our left finger is paining or right hand is paining. So it is mapped. The sensors are giving the intensity resolution, the type resolution, that whether something is touching or something is paining, or there is a pressure, or there is a hot cold, or there is a soft hard, or it is related to posture of the body. You are standing, or you are sitting, or you are lying. Yeah, it's able to sense, of course. And as usual, the sensitivity can be software controlled here through the post processing. Now, the somatic sensors are generally not directly connected here so much, but sometimes they are, and they are more intimately connected to the motor control. So, for controlling the body posture, limb movements, etc. But they are also sometimes when you are touching some object, for example, whether the apple is smooth or rough, the texture information can come from skin directly to here, and you can associate it with hybrid sensory image memory. Even the touch and feel, literally the touch and feel comes from here, and that you are able to associate here, right? Further, with further learning, there is a next level of correlation when from words we start making sentences. So this is the second level of correlation in the brain. So zeroth layer, first layer, second layer. I mean, you can say layer wise if you please. So here we start using objects and apply some rules. So rules will reside here, the rules of grammar, the rules of math, the formulae, the axioms, the relationships, etc. And we tie up various objects into a kind of sequence. Okay. So the sequence must start working here, the clock must start working. And then as per this clock, we arrange the entities in this memory area into a bigger directory somewhere here, which is kind of connecting various objects and various senses into complex sentences, simple and not so simple sentences and rules and formulae and stuff. So this becomes the second level of correlation. Okay. Now this obviously has to be learned after one has developed the capability of analysis and synthesis. So this aspect is synthesis. So from here we synthesize these and we get here. We analyze these and we come here. Okay. So now hybrid sensory image memory can be analyzed, can be synthesized further. Okay. So to the next level. And then there is a third level of integration further, where we use multiple sentences and build stories, ideas, passages, rhymes, songs, theories, faith, complete dance sequence. Okay. So these are the higher level of intelligence, where multiple sentences could be used, or going from the idea, one can form the sentences and translate into objects and speak out uh, through here. Okay. So that's the complex process of recall and expression. Okay. But the ideas are built, the thought process, theories, mental blocks, everything will be somewhere here. Rules will be here, of course, mental blocks can be here. But then the theories and hypothesis and the profound thoughts will all be somewhere here. So that is the third level of integration. So by far, yes, this is the complete block diagram of a working human brain. Okay. So these are all the functions of a human brain, and this is how it works. Okay. Now let us see one by one the various processes which go on in human brain, and we will correlate it with this block diagram in subsequent slides. The various processes which are going on in human brain, we will analyze with this block diagram. Okay. So this talk is a little different. On every slide, you will see the similar looking diagram, but with some variation, of course. So where the learning begins, the day zero when the baby is born. When my son was born, what did he know? So the baby, when it's newborn, does not know how to focus the eye, how to track the eye, how to look. They are not able to control their muscles. They don't know which muscle is to be used how. So all this has to be learned. They are not able to control their movement. The movements are sporadic and they are more like reflexes. Okay. Uh, Image memories are empty to start with. There is nothing here. Okay. The sense which starts working first, because here a lot of post processing is required, which is not yet learned. Okay. Stereo sense is not yet learned. How to hear is not yet learned. How to identify sound is not yet learned. Okay. And vision comes, of course, much later. A lot of things are required. Even this is not learned. So a baby does not know how it can move, how he can move his hand. He does not know how to control the hand. Okay. How to control his neck. The neck is weak. The muscles are physically weak. The trunk muscles are weak. The neck muscles are weak. Okay. So whatever movements happen are just random movements. Okay. More driven by reflexes than learning. Okay. And those are all sporadic and wild, uncontrolled movements. Basically, the baby is trying to figure out his own body. So how to move a finger, which is that first of all, that this is my finger, this is my hand. Even to learn that, it takes some time. Yeah. So basically, initially, only the taste and smell sense is functional. So the reflex is sucking reflex. So anything which comes, baby will try to suck, put it in the mouth, and try to associate maximum taste sensors. Try to figure out what is the taste, because taste is all it can figure out at that time. Baby is able to figure out only taste on day one. So after that, of course, whatever inputs go to the physical inputs go to the baby, is able to learn the various tastes, the taste of water, the taste of milk, the taste of sugar, and so on. Yeah. So this archive gets slowly built up. Okay. Later, of course, the as people keep talking and cuddling the baby, somatic senses slowly develop. It starts realizing the mapping of inputs for realizing where somebody is touching, where something is paining, and to some extent controlling the hand movement. That thing comes after a while. Also, vision, of course, on day one, if you face the body towards sun, the baby will just close the eyes. Okay, because that's a reflex. Baby does not know yet how to focus, how to track eyes, how to see, how to identify objects. Baby does not know that on day one initially. So all this post processing is to be learned. Now this is what I call as pre-primary learning of infant stage. Okay. After that, all these functions start developing. All this post processing is learned. All this post processing is learned. All this post processing is learned. This is minimal post processing, so this is strong from day one. Okay, and only this is strong initially. Yeah. So then, of course, the baby learns how to track the eyes, how to focus on some moving objects, how to move the neck, how to move the eyes, and then baby is able to see something, recognize some faces, recognize some objects, and things like that. But of course, it requires the movement, control of muscles, the eye muscles as well as other muscles, and all these functionalities have to be learnt before baby is able to do this thing. And so, pre-primary learning of the infantile stage will involve focusing and tracking of eyes, control of neck and trunk movement, control movement of limbs, the body posture control, and producing some sounds which the baby is able to modulate. Otherwise, just yelling, just blowing out air through the lungs, the baby can cry, but the baby is not able to control the modulation of the sound. Yeah, that is gets learnt after a while. So this is pre-primary learning in an infant. The next stage, of course, which is there together with this, and this is muscle memory or reflexes. Okay. Now, in reflexes, there is nothing in the brain. I mean, all these memory areas are empty. There is no correlation. Nothing has been learned. Only thing is inputs, sensors are bypassing all the brain functions and directly commanding the muscles to move the body parts in a rather uncontrolled manner, literally as knee jerk response. So, here the sensory inputs directly drive the motor outputs, and it's a knee jerk response. And without getting any further information, information may be there, but it comes much later at level 1, level 2, or level 3 of correlations that we saw on the chart. So, actions happen first, primary sensory image is formed later, and movements are not controlled. So, these are the reflexes. Of course, sportsmen do use muscle memory. I mean, when we hear cricket commentary, we hear a lot of techniques and all, but I'm sure, like any other sport, it's played by muscle memory. The batsman will not think while he's hitting the shot. It comes automatically through reflex. Okay, so that's one function which even adults use while driving. We learn how to drive with reflexes. So it's not just an infantile stage. Reflexes are there with us throughout our life. So that's where we bypass the brain, and if at all the brain comes into picture much later after the action has been taken. Yeah, so that's the reflex. Then let us talk of primary learning. Primary learning is learning of objects. So that's what I said is something which gets learned. So that is the primary learning where all the senses are involved. I have not included somatic sense that much because it's not so significant initially. But basically, taste, smell, how we pronounce it, and how the object looks like. So it is object level learning where the baby starts learning about various objects. Okay, so all these memory areas get correlated into a hybrid image, a directory which is linking something here, something here, something here, and coining a word to represent that. So that's the first level of correlation. That's the primary learning. So correlation of different sensory images into hybrid image, and it is saved as object, word, places, people, materials, food, and building up further and refining the hybrid image memory for relatively newer entries. If something is not already here, it can be learned. If something is here, whatever is coming can be identified against what is already there. That yes, this is the item. So I am seeing an apple, for example. Apple is already here, then baby is able to identify. If apple is not known for the first time it is coming, probably it will get stored that yes, this is something like a cricket ball, it is red, it is sweet. This is what people call as apple. So that is what is learned. Yeah. Uh, Further, another process is there which is called noticing and identifying. So that's what I said, that if something is already there in the memory and you see some image through these, you are able to find out what is this item. Okay. So you can notice and you can identify. And noticing is by adjusting sensitivity, and identifying, you give an output further that what you have seen. okay, and what you have heard and what is the object in front now. So that is going out here. So as I said, one may hear, one may look, you may not listen, you may not see, unless there is an attention factor, unless there is an attempt to notice. Suppose you are sitting in a train, lot of objects are passing by through the window. If you are asked to recall, you may not remember anything because you were seeing, but you were not. You were looking, but you were not seeing. Okay, so you have not registered unless it was something extraordinary, something which is not routine. You may not register it also. Okay, so the depth to which inputs are processed depends on the interest factor. So that is what is the interest factor. So what is the motivation? What is the interest factor for you to pay attention? And up to what depth you should process that input. Okay, so that is dependent on interest factor. So matching the input hybrid image with stored database and classifying, for example, and correlating it further. I mean, that is depending on interest factor, one could do that. Okay. Then next is, of course, if you are involving the rules, the sentences, the grammar rules, the math formulae, and you are doing scrutiny or validation of what you are being shown. Okay. So whatever is the input, that input is being scrutinized with second level of correlation. You are trying to apply some rules, some theorems, some postulates, and then you are able to validate it. Yes, this is okay or this is not okay, or you are scrutinizing. Okay, so that is the process of scrutiny and validation, which involves all this, and it may even involve somatic sense sometimes. For example, you want to check the texture of the object, as I said. Yes. So something from here, something from here, something from here, something from here. And then you are comparing with this memory, applying some rules and saying yes or no, and saying okay or not okay with the tag. Okay. You may even be applying, of course, some sequence factor to see which is first, which is later, because for rules you need all this sequence factor as well. Right. So this is the process of scrutinizing and validation, where the sequence of images is checked, interpreted, and validated according to two rules at level 2. So the rules will reside somewhere here. And then you accept or reject. You put a tag here that this is okay, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, and so on. Yeah. So that is that. Then there is a process of synthesis. Synthesis is, we have already said that from first level correlation, you go to second level, from second level, you go to third level, and using the clock sequencing to go for higher order of sequence. Okay. So combining words into sentences as per learned rules, or sequencing sentences for further integration into a story, idea, thought. Okay. Prose, verse, whatever. So dance sequence, painting. So all that will come here. Painting will come somewhere here, of course, the landscaping, right? So that is the process of synthesis. Then analysis is, of course, the opposite of that. You have something here, you break it into these rules, and something which is here, you break it into objects, and something which is here, you can break into elements. Okay. So all this will work together. So you are able to do all the circulating churning here, and you are able to break a complex thing into smaller elements. That is the process of analysis. So breaking certain inputs, heard or read, into letters, shapes, sounds, and learning will begin at object level. After that, you say A for apple, and words are learned first, alphabets are learned later, and of course, analysis can involve breaking of level 3 and level 2 down to level 1. Okay, so it is the reverse flow. Memorizing. is another function where what we do is, how do we memorize? We deliberately repeat something. How do we mug up a poem? We pronounce it number of times. Okay. So we force the repeat. If we are reading a book, we repeat the same passage. For that, we have to command our eyes, we have to command our hand to pick up the book and read it again. So that this is involved, all this is involved in repeating. Okay. If we are dancing, we repeat the same movement. We are practicing music, we repeat the same sounds that we produce. Yeah. So repeating has to be done together with muscles, of course, together with outputs. So we repeat, and when we repeat, the thing gets stored more thoroughly and it can be recalled relatively easily. That is what is memorizing all about. So there is a churning, there is a repeating, there is further linkages within, so that you are able to locate the entity very easily. Whatever you want to search in the memory, you are able to recall it easily. Okay. So there are two ways in which memorizing works. One is by repeating or replaying the same inputs again and again using visual as well as auditory senses, and using exercises also in case of physical activities, and force correlation with already known content. So normally, suppose we want to remember something, what we try to do is to link it extensively to the things which we already know, right? So we try to have correlational linkages of higher order, so that the same object gets linked at many places, so that we are able to recall it more easily through any of the path subsequently. Okay. So the force correlation with already known content to make the newer information easier to recall, easier to locate, and more permanent relatively in the neural net, and it is more retentive, can be recalled relatively easily through multiple pathways. Yeah. So that's the mechanism of memorizing. Recall and reproduce is related to this one. Now we are just churning the memory, trying to recall something, recall some story, recall some instance, recall some face, recall some email, if you please. And pre-existing sequence in level 2, level 3 are simply fetched, identified, and replayed. Yeah. So lot of churning is involved. Then, of course, psychology people talk a lot about emotions and self. So emotions and self are nothing but some memory area here in third level, where things related to myself, my own, my things, me, my ego, my likes, my dislike, my aspiration, my empathy, my passion, my code of conduct, my faith, everything resides here. That the rules, and self is generally closer to somatic senses, it is closer to muscle control, because self is more related to my own defense of the body. Okay. So it is intimately linked with the motor output control. It is intimately linked with my own somatic sensors, my own pain, right? So the self, the feeling of self, and the feeling of belonging, that what belongs to me, what is mine, what is not mine, what I am, what is my ego, what are my likes, what are my dislikes, all that is called as self. Okay. So what are my habits, what are my cultural influences, what is my safety rule, how do I care and nurture my uh, caring and nurturing for others is a part of emotion, you can say. Yeah. So being emotional is being caring and being nurturing for surroundings and for other subjects. Yeah. So care and nurturing is a part of emotions. So emotion and self is somewhere which is somewhere on level 3 integration, where which is more intimately linked with my relations, my behavior, my feelings, and on so on. Okay. It's not so much of stories and theories. It is what is me and what is mine and what I like and what. So that part is called as self. And how I deal with others is more of, emotions. How I deal with situations is a part of emotion. Okay. So it can it is directly linked with motor output. It is directly linked with my somatic sense because it is related to my own body, my own self, my own safety. Yeah. So level 3 linkages around own identity, own safety, morality, and mission. So all these things form the self and emotions. Okay. And there are voluntary actions where knowingly I am able to control my muscles and carry out some action. Say a dance or a painting we want to do. Yes, it is all voluntary. Okay. So, and involuntary things, of course, directly from chemical sensors, physiological sensor, muscles get controlled to control the secretion of hormones, for example, to control the heartbeat, for example. Okay. So all this can be involuntary. Now, it is said that our Rishi Munis were able to control their own heartbeat. That is, they were able to, with yoga and Siddhi, they were able to make the involuntary things as voluntary. Now, is it advisable? See, in terms of control systems, if I say, voluntary is something where suppose I have a control line, I have an arrow which is controlling some process. In between that arrow, I have to introduce a gate. I have to introduce a switch. So every time I want to switch the action, I have to operate the switch. Okay, that's called as gated control. So voluntary actions are gated actions where I am able to switch them on or switch them off at will. An involuntary thing is where there is no switch. So I am not able to control. Now, if I learn to introduce a switch, for example, to control my heartbeat, for every single heartbeat, I have to give a command, then it will happen. It will not happen autonomously. That was perhaps the reason why Rishi Munis were craving for moksha all the way, much more than ordinary mortals. Because probably living had become such a big, demanding task for their brain. Every single thing, if they have to remember and command through the brain, it will be very taxing. And no doubt that life will become a big burden. So, yeah. So, whatever nature has made involuntary, it's better to keep it involuntary. It's better not to make it voluntary. And philosophically, the same thing applies to whether you should go to a fortune teller. Nature has made something that you should not know, so you should not know. Better don't know. If you know it, it's going to trouble. Yeah. So that's the philosophical aspect. So one involuntary becomes voluntary. I have explained you just now. Okay. So voluntary actions are controlled through sensory inputs, while involuntary actions are autonomously controlled unknowingly. And when the same is applied to level 3 process, it's called as conscious mind and subconscious mind. So voluntary, involuntary are in a way analogous to conscious and subconscious. Okay. Whenever you are able to relate with your senses, okay, that is the sensible memory and that is the conscious self. Okay. Whatever is not related to that, yet it is there inside and it is doing something here on the output side, is a subconscious mind. Okay. So when it is at level 3, but whether when it is happening within the level 3, then we call it as subconscious mind and conscious mind. When it is at muscle level, we call it as voluntary action and involuntary action. So very clear, they are similar terms but happen at different places in the brain, right? uh, this is an interesting topic. How do we dream? What are dreams made up of? Now, the interesting part in dream is that physical inputs and outputs are shut off when we dream. So there is nothing above. Dreams start from our memory archive, not the physical inputs. The physical inputs are snapped, physical outputs are snapped. To some extent, only the somatic senses are connected. If somebody touches it, maybe we wake up. not otherwise. We may not hear also the sound because auditory is cut off, smell taste is cut off, visual memory is cut off. And then what happens is that the brain replays some things here. So we feel we are seeing something and we are talking to somebody and some incidences are happening. Okay. So sensory inputs and motor outputs get delinked from level 1, level 2, and level 3 of correlations. And at random, some test images are simulated. They are just thrown up and suggested. And then the thought process related to those start here autonomously. So the currents will start circulating here. And you feel that some act is getting played, okay, in your memory. However, if you recall your dreams, it is difficult to recall. Uh, the sequence factor is lacking in the dreams. For example, if you are dreaming that you are going somewhere, okay, let us say to a railway station or a bus stand. Now, while going, you are seeing some things around you, okay. But for some reason, if you have to come back somewhere and then you are returning, you will not be able to find the same things again. You'll find that you have returned somewhere else because the sequence part is not faithfully reproduced in dreams. This is a random circulating current. So the logical aspect and the sequence and the reversibility gets impaired. And sometimes the dreams tend to go in repetitive loops. And also there is a soaring lack of taste and touch. You are able to see eatable things, you get tempted to eat, but you are not able to taste something. Okay. So that's what dream is made up of. I always compare dreams with the testing of a PLC. In engineering controls, when we have to have a machine controller and we want to test its logic, what we do is precisely this, that we delink all the input output. We simulate certain combination of input output and see how the logic responds. So dreaming is much like testing of body logics offline. For the safety of body, we dissociate the input output and we just play it in the memory and see how the memory behaves. Okay. And more often than not, this thing plays an important role in dreams. So the feeling of self, me, my ego, likes, dislike, aspiration, empathy, passion, code of conduct, all this will assume importance while we dream because currents are circulating from here and they go up to here. So up to object level, you are able to see. Okay. So you feel that you are seeing these things, but actually you are not seeing. The input outputs are shut, but only this memory is tickled up to here. Okay. So that is what dreams are made up of. And last but not the least is the process of thinking. In thinking, what happens? We are churning whatever linkages are there in level 1, level 2, level 3. So we are churning, reshuffling the stored database. We are establishing the new interconnections. We are making the new directories at level 2 and level 3. So, and this can happen either spontaneously on its own or some input may be triggering it. So, some input coming from somewhere from hybrid image memory may trigger this process of thinking. And it will go on and on and on. For example, if somebody sees an apple, for example, or somebody hears the word apple, or somebody is able to hold an apple in hand, the input of apple image, depending on the mood and the makeup of the person and the interest factor, somebody may think of Himachal Pradesh, Kashmir with apple. Somebody may think of one level further, and may think of Farooq Abdullah. You may think of even Pahalgam of late related to Kashmir. So that thought chain of thoughts will go on and on depending on the mood, the attention, and the interest of the person. Okay. So thinking is not exactly predictable. It depends on mood. It depends on what circuits the neurons will take and what all directories will get linked to this churning, either driven by some input or even spontaneous sometimes. Without any input also you could be thinking something, right? And depending on mood, somebody may think of Kashmir, terrorism in Kashmir, somebody may think of Apple iPhone, somebody may think of Adam and Eve, and of course things which we associate with Adam and Eve. Okay, so depending on mood of the person, depending on temperament, depending on the motivation, so to say, anything can be linked. Okay, that is the process of thinking. So churning through and reshuffling the stored database and establishing possibly new interconnections, new directories, forming new theories, new postulates. And basically, there are two types of thinking when we say thinking. One is called as convergent thinking, where the focus is on applying rules. That is, we are using more of left brain, rules, axioms, mathematical formulae, say IQ, verbal, quant, etc., which is focused thinking to apply and validate the rules and formulae, etc., to subject the inputs to these rules and formulae and say yes or no and validate them. So that's the kind of convergent thinking, which is controlling IQ and verbal and quant capability. Okay. And other opposite thinking is divergent thinking, or this is called as intelligence, this is called as imagination. So where we cast our net very wide and we spread our creativity very wide to locate unusual linkages and build unusual linkages with unlikely objects coming together, so to say. So this is divergent thinking. Okay. So where we try to say think all possible products which can be made from corn, all possible uses of a pencil, for example, all possible. uh, Basically, we are thinking wide. It's not focused. It's vast, wide. We are trying to think about variety of things which are unusually uh, coming together on their own. Yeah, so that is the thinking. Now, yeah, these were all the processes for human brain related to its block diagram, related to flowchart. But an important aspect that is still remaining is what motivates us to learn and think and to process the information further, deeper, etc., and build the neural interconnections. One is the instinct of survival. That is the survivalist instinct. Other is, of course, our own protection, our own safety, physical and psychological success. Success is a big motivator. So, success, envy, pleasure principle, heuristic pleasure principle, something that gives us pleasure. Say, being constructive gives us pleasure. Yes, I know. So, heuristic or pleasure principle is there behind as a motivation for learning. Sometimes even comfort and lethargy, because when steam engine was discovered, it was out of lethargy. Somebody tried to go away from work, so he put a rod in place of cam, and that's where the cam got discovered. So, comfort and lethargy also drives innovation at times. So that's another possible factor. Cost of improving efficiency, of conserving resources, being good to Mother Earth, okay, environment friendly. So that is another, of course, motivating factor, and ought to be rightly so. Social recognition, yes. Sometimes just compliance because everybody is doing, so we also want to do like that. So social compliance, okay. And sometimes babies copy adults just to illustrate that yes, I am also able to do this. Whatever you are able to do, I am also able to do. So emulating somebody and illustrating that look, I can also do. Okay. That's also sometimes a motivating factor for learning. Sometimes we just want to prove to others that no, I am not abnormal. I fear that others will think I'm abnormal unless I do something some way. So that's another motivation. Coming back to the beginning, these are the association areas. Another picture from public domain. Uh, what I want to focus is now what is level 1, level 2, level 3, and where it is located. Okay. So Wernicke's area. that is language comprehension and to some extent word formation. Now this is level 0. Level 1 is Wernicke's area. So that is language comprehension, rules, math, formation of grammar rules. Okay, so that is forming sentences, for example, with the grammar rules. That is somewhere here, Wernicke's area. So that is the level 1 integration area, correlation area. It can also come to word formation. Naming of objects can also come here. So this is the primary memory. This is the object hybrid image memory. The hybrid sensory images will reside somewhere here. Okay. And verbal quant, that is this area, is level 2, where we talk of rules, axioms, sentences, etc. Sorry about my previous statement. This arrow has come later. Now this is the hybrid image memory, where we are still identifying words and objects. So this is the primary learning. This is the next level of learning, where the rules and sentences and linguistics and math is learned. So that is verbal quant. This is level 2. And level 3 is in the frontal side of the brain, that is this part, cerebrum. So planning of complex movements of body as well as elaboration of thoughts. Okay. So that is level 3. And self and emotions are somewhere in the lower part of the brain. Behavior, emotions, motivation, self, that is somewhere here, because it is physically related to the muscle control. Muscle control is going out somewhere from here. It is physically close to that. So these neurons are disposed to take this functionality. Okay. Motor actions are controlled by this part. Sensors in the skin are controlled by this part. Somatosensors. Yeah. Vision is controlled by this part. And PID loops are below this, the cerebellum, that is not shown in this picture. So that's all. That's all from me for today's talk. I hope you have enjoyed the talk, and uh, one aspect is remaining, which we will see in subsequent video. That is how these input outputs and association areas get determined. Okay. What is controlling that? Which part of brain should control what activity? How does a nerve know where it should go and connect in the body? What controls the physical input output connection? What controls the mapping? That's an important aspect. So that will be covered in the next video. Until then, bye bye. See you next time.